So the way we're going to start each round is you'll begin with your hands behind your back, and I'll count down from 3. And after I say 1, you can reach for the bell. First person to hit the bell, they will get the opportunity to take the first pass of the challenge. 3, 2, 1. I think Team Flash got that. All right, Tim. Your first challenge is to come to the center and show us all how to do the Macarena. 3, 2, 1. For this challenge, you have your choice between, no matter what, you're going to eat a bug if you choose to accept the challenge, but you have your choice between a lightly seasoned worm or a lightly seasoned cricket. Team Lituation is going with the cricket. What flavor are you picking? She's going with sour cream and onion. Give it up for Kiva. Let's tie break it with rock, paper, scissors. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. All right, here we go. Team Lituation for the final challenge. The final challenge is to sing karaoke for us, and you have a choice between 2 songs. You can either sing Don't Stop Believing by Journey.
Just a small town girl. Living in a lonely world. Midnight train going anywhere. I would love for us to welcome, with the big Creative Mornings welcome, Yewande Austin.
Good morning. You all didn't warn me this is going to be a turned-up crowd here at 8:30 in the morning. I would have planned a little differently. I feel like I should be putting on a concert or something. Let's see if we can pull this off. So one more time, good morning. Good morning. You know, when I was asked to speak about courage, I said there's so many different ways that I could take this. I think that most of us think of big, bold, heroic feats when it comes to being courageous. But I find that the people that I have met around the world, those that have far less education than we do, that don't have access to the tools that most of us take for granted here in the United States every day, that they act courageously, that every single one of us have the ability to lean in and act more courageously with the gifts that we've been given. But we often undervalue what those are. Most of us know the word courage, but the significance is distinctly different for every single person in this room. One word that identifies courage to you, just by a show of hands. Yeah.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
Heart.
Heart. Passion. Risk. Yeah? What else? Perseverance. Authenticity. One more time. Conceding. Giving in to that call that all of us have at some point in our lives to act, to lean in, to make a situation better than what we found it. But yet, there's often something that gets in the way, mainly us. Some expressions of courage manifest in bold, heroic acts, like Nat Turner, who led the very first anti-slave rebellion right here in Virginia, or Elizabeth Van Lew, a philanthropist who used her own money to buy and then free slaves. Both of those acts happened right here in Virginia, but then there are the often understated acts that are driven by our innate desire to thrive, like when we were babies, taking our first steps. How about that time that you dared to pursue your dream or lost a loved one, knowing that life would never be the same, but somehow you had to find a way to push on? And then there are those superhuman acts of courage, like firefighters that go into burning buildings and save lives, or teachers that dare to expand the minds of our youth. But rarely do we recognize the impact that courage has on society. There's a distinct ripple effect that occurs when we witness or perform acts of courage. One of the earliest memories that I have of being courageous was marching against Apartheid when I was just around 12 years old. Yeah, I've been around a little while. I know I may not look like it, but It's been a minute, yes. If we know how long ago apartheid was, this inspiration that I've had to change the world is nothing new to me. It was in those moments that, quite frankly, I was afraid of marching against apartheid. But that day, I leaned on my mother's courage to stand for others. I was scared. Every moment of courage that I've taken and that most of us have dared to stare in the face is scary. I thought for sure, based on the history that I had read, that I was going to be attacked by dogs and maybe even shot down. But what I found is that there was diversity with people, like-minded people that were there to make a change. And that day defined the rest of my life. I knew that I wanted to fight for the voiceless until the day I died. But there's so many benefits to being courageous that we often don't think about. It gives you more influence, develops confidence, raises awareness about injustice. We're seeing a lot of that happening around the world right now, especially with social media that allows us to voice our position on injustices in a way that we never had the ability to do before. It certainly improves outcomes because nothing's going to change unless someone has the courage to speak up. But most importantly, it gives other people the courage to be courageous. It's important to note, however, that courage isn't the absence of fear, but rather the ability to stare fear in the face. You know, I see you over there, you handsome devil, but still decide to take a risk that the choice that you make could indeed be revolutionary. Everyone in this room has already done some pretty courageous things, and it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. Starting with getting out of bed early and coming to hear this message, to be in the presence of other like-minded people who want to hear these messages that fuel them to get through their day and perhaps plant a seed for change. What's something that you did this morning that you're proud of before you got here? Just shout it out for me. I feel like this is my village, my tribe, so we can share. No judgment.
I rode my bike.
You rode your bike, really? All the way here? Yo, okay. What else? What are some acts that you're...
Took my 13-year-old to school and didn't have a fight with him in the car.
Ooh, took her 13-year-old to school and did not have a fight in the car this morning. Progress, Mom, progress, yes. Talk to a stranger. Beautiful. One of the very first things that I teach people in teaching the process of diversity and inclusion, how are you going to get to know more about other people and yourself without making those connections and stepping outside of yourself? You see, every single day that we wake up, we do have a choice. We have a choice to be complacent, to be indifferent, or to act courageously. The choice will invariably shift the energy that invites or repels very specific opportunities that could change your life and the life of others. It's what theorists call a vibrational shift. Why? Because we are all connected. So courage, much like this flu epidemic, is actually contagious. But being courageous does not mean that you don't take the time to assess the factors that influence acting courageously. A distinct plan is still required, starting with recognizing there's a problem. I hate my job, right? So what are you going to do about that? You're going to complain, attempt to resolve the issue, call in sick, and sleep in bed and watch Dr. Phil all day long, right? Oh, y'all have done it. I know. Because you're courageous, right? So you need time for reflection on that particular day. Or you quit and you find another job. But next, you've got to assess your options and then create a plan. Now, this is a critical step because when you're being courageous, it's important to note that the plan could either succeed fabulously or fail miserably. This is the chance that you take when you're being courageous, right? So you quit your job, lose your house, and then couch surf for the next 5 years of your life, right? Or you end up becoming a billionaire because you finally had time to develop that revolutionary app that everybody in the world needs. That's after you watch Dr. Phil every morning. It could go either way. But then you've got to execute the best solution. Now that's always the hardest step, right? I still struggle with this every day. Okay, village, now we're gonna be honest with each other. I'm gonna say it one more time. That's the hardest step, isn't it? Taking a chance that your courageous act could be revolutionary, and it could succeed, or it could fail. How do you look at either one of those on the opposite end of the spectrum? This is right around the time that you start thinking about everything that could go wrong, instead of making room for the ways that your courage could change lives. There have been so many moments in my life where I'm glad that I chose courage, and every single one was scary as hell. But when I realized the price of doing nothing was too high, I took a chance. Not only changed my life, but has changed the lives of many other people. I wanted to take you through some of the most pivotal moments in my life where courage turned out all right. Starting with, dun 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 dun, surviving a heart attack. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. We'll get into that a little bit later. Confronting a dictator. Negotiating my own extortion. Oh, it got real fun. Oh, the lady with the 13-year-old is looking at me like, yeah, you think you have problems with your 13-year-old, right? But that was 3 times that I negotiated my own extortion. My life is not boring. Facing my mother's demand for a grandchild this year. Yeah, go ahead and let that marinate for a second. When's the last time that your mother came up to you and said, I'm serious, this year? Like, okay, lady, the last time I checked, I think I'm in charge of my ovaries, but we can talk about it. Okay. And last but not least, building a village. Now notice that the stakes got higher by number 5, right? Because by the time you've survived a heart attack, building a village in the developing world with terrorists who threaten you every day, it's like no big deal. Courage, it's no big deal. I was relocating refugees at 6 o'clock this morning in Nigeria on the phone. It happens, yeah? Once you get into that path of acting courageously, it gives you the tools that you need to get over that next hump. So starting with surviving a heart attack. So clearly, having a heart attack is a pretty traumatic event. Today, nearly 800,000 Americans have a heart attack every single year. That's 1 every 40 seconds. And I was one of the lucky ones. The moments leading up to that day in 2012 are indeed a story in and of itself. I had developed a pulmonary embolism that collapsed my lung after heart surgery, and by the time I'd endured over 40 doctor's visits that year and 3 hospital stays, I lost everything. I lost my home. I lost my ability to generate income. I lost my confidence. And there were moments where I had truly lost my faith. It was not a happy household. I can tell you, how many gospel fans do we have here in the house? Yeah? Okay. It's okay. Everybody doesn't have to like gospel music, but I used it as a crutch to give me courage every day, but it turned more into like hearing, never could have made it, right? Every day, followed by, every day. It was a sad place. Never could have made it without you. I would have lost it all. But now I see how you were there for me, and I can say I'm stronger. It was sad. It was a sad household. And let me tell you, I started by imploring the steps that I shared with you. First of all, by getting out of bed. The bed that had become my prison. Because I was afraid to move. I was so consumed with the fear of dying that I forgot how to live. But when I look at those steps and you look at your reality, it started off with the fact that I was scared, I was depressed, and I was broke. So I could either continue to allow that fear to consume me or fight to get my life back. And that's exactly what I wanted. Then I wrote 2 lists. One list of everything I was grateful for, and the second list with everything that made me happy. In this country, all too often, I think we undervalue doing the things that make us happy. And you want to know what was at the top of that list of what made me happy? Music and the arts. As I debated between pursuing a 9-to-5 job or pursuing my passion, I chose creativity. Creativity truly saved my life because I had used it so many times to save the lives of others. I had used music and the arts to teach trafficking victims how to rebuild their lives. I had used music and the arts to teach students how to improve learning outcomes and improve student engagement. It was like my right arm. So losing something that I loved was not an option. So I sold my house in the suburbs, moved to a little rinky-dink apartment with my 2 cats downtown Atlanta, and tripled my business. In 3 years, I had expanded to 10 countries and now have a waiting list for programs in 16 more because I dared to not allow heart disease to define the rest of my life. Now, I'm sorry. So these are some images of some of the work that I've been able to do locally and internationally because of that work. Now, the next story is one that I've never shared publicly until now. In 2014, the Office of the President for the Republic of the Gambia invited me to produce youth empowerment programs. I knew very little about the Gambia at that time, except it was one of the smallest African nations that happened to be run by a dictator, President Yahya Jammeh. Quite frankly, the controversy surrounding President Jammeh meant very little to me. I was there to do the work that I loved. I wasn't there for politics. However, I would find very quickly that I would be in the middle of a little bit of controversy myself. The success of my programs very quickly reached President Jammeh, and he invited me one day to hold court with him. This is what you call holding court. He totes around this, it's crazy, right? He totes around this leather sofa with him everywhere he goes. This is what dictators do, apparently, you know? And if he's really interested in getting to know you, he actually engages you in a debate in front of like 10,000 people, surrounded by like armed guards, you see there, like with AK-47s. Not intimidating at all. And so on this particular day, I remember how I invoked my courage when he asked me 2 very distinct questions. 1, what did I think about President Obama? And 2, how did I feel about homosexuality? Yeah, right. What's that all about? It was a setup. It was an obvious setup because President Jammeh had publicly declared his disdain for President Obama. He felt that an African-American president should run a country like him. He was very proud of being a dictator, which I guess dictators are, but he was very proud of it. He wasn't shy about it at all. He thought that's just the way a country should be run. And he thought that President Obama was too fair. He was too diplomatic. Secondly, I also knew that in this country, in this beautiful little country, the Republic of the Gambia, that President Jammeh had a reputation for either jailing or murdering anybody who he found guilty of practicing homosexuality. This could turn out really, really bad. So I had to assess my options, be true to myself and say what I felt honestly, or lie to save my ass. Because the options, because of the way this country was run, little did I know before I got there, is that I could either earn President Jammeh's respect or potentially get sent home in a body bag to my mother. It could go either way. Well, I stood up to President Jammeh that day, and I told him exactly the words that I'm going to share with you. 1, with all due respect, Your Excellency, President Obama has to be a president for every citizen in the United States, a country that is built of immigrants. He can't just be a president for people of color or for immigrants, but every single person in that country. And number 2, I don't care who anyone chooses to love, as long as they're not bringing harm to me or anybody in their communities. It's no business of mine. And then I awaited my fate. Those were some tense moments. And I tell you, that's how it turned out. In that moment, I think he was telling me, you should not trust me. I think that's what was happening. You all don't understand how scared I was. I'm smiling, but I'm like, holy crap. How is this going to turn out? I'm going to tell you how it turned out. In those moments, I remember after him pointing his finger at me, he did nothing but smile, as if to say, I don't agree with you, but I respect your position, and I respect your courage to speak your truth. And the very next day, he asked me to extend my stay for another 3 weeks to sing at his birthday celebration with heads of state. I know he loved music. Dictators like music. As a matter of fact, he held, I was there for over a month, and he held a concert free to the public 4 times. Every week he had a concert in the stadium. It was pretty amazing. But he asked me to stay on for 3 weeks to perform at his birthday and to build a school there to teach STEAM, using the arts to teach STEM subjects. He ended up becoming an ally. Who knew? And then there's my time in the Makoko slums of Nigeria. Now, sometimes courage can be confused with overconfidence, which isn't working too well in America right now, but we're gonna work it out. We're gonna work it out. But unfortunately, fortunately in this case, it did work in my favor. The first extortion attempt that I experienced was horrifying, but you'd be amazed at how easy it is to negotiate an extortion attempt by the time you get to number 2 and 3. It was like, oh, I know what this is. They want something. And I know that I have what's needed to resolve it. So in 2015, I was producing a series of social entrepreneurship workshops for students in Lagos, Nigeria, while I was filming a documentary about human trafficking. Now, due to the level of conflict in this particular region, my host had recommended that I hire some soldiers, which I don't do everywhere that I go. But against my better judgment, I went ahead and followed, and those were my security guards, again with AK-47s. Would you mess with them? They didn't even really need the guns, as far as I'm concerned. But everything was working out okay in the village. And I was like, that's money we can save and buy food for the kids in the village and supplies, and I sent them home, which was a bad move. Because later that day, Mr. Henry, my driver, terrible, terrible driver, had been pulled over by a traffic officer. And when we were all pulled over, my team in the car, she jumped into the back seat and threatened to take all of us to jail. Totally illegal, hello. And as my assistant is yelling that you should take Mr. Henry to jail, he's a terrible driver. And then the videographers, it was a mess. It was a hot mess. The volume and energy in that car literally went from 1 to 10 in a matter of seconds. But I felt eerily still and quiet. And I implored the very steps that I share with you today. 1, I had no desire to go to jail in the developing world and had about 50 children waiting for me to teach them in the slums. I recognized there was a problem. So I had to assess my options. That was either go through with paying an extortion or be sent to jail and leave Inez, my dear mother, to figure out how to get me out of jail in Nigeria, which could have gone really bad. So I decided to execute a plan. That plan is as follows. Through a series of hand gestures to my assistant, I was like, is this about money? And she was like, mm-hmm. So we start throwing up fingers, like how much money do we need to get out of the situation? And she threw up a 1. I decided to triple it. And I asked everybody in the choir to be quiet. And I pulled out 3,000 naira. And I apologized profusely to the officer and asked her to hold out her hand in the back seat. And I put the 3,000 naira in her hand. And I'll never forget what her response was that day in the middle of my extortion attempt. She said, okay, you may go. What? Like you're just threatening to take everybody in this car to jail, which would have been for even more money, right? And this could have ended really badly. You see, thinking creatively doesn't always require us to come up with some big complex solution. Sometimes thinking creatively means that we have to understand a problem, and that most of the time we have access to the tools that we need to resolve it before it escalates to a bigger problem. So that's my extortion attempt. Now, the next one, having a child this year. You want to know how that's coming, don't you? Right? The reality is that as I face the reality that my ovaries are quickly turning into dust, that my mother is facing her own reality, mortality, and that she really would love to have a little piece of me to enjoy while she still can. For now, let's just say that I'm taking applications, and but if you don't think you can handle being interrogated by an FBI agent, that's Inez Jackson, then you should probably keep it moving. So, next, building a village. So I really, really, really want to tell you about the greatest feat of courage in my life thus far. The first question that most people ask when I tell them that I'm building a village in Nigeria is why? Who goes into a country where rape is as common as breathing air, and extortion and murder are the top choice for resolving conflict? Well, I do. Why would I step into this situation? Because sadly I know that Nigeria has one of the 10 highest rates of human trafficking in the world. Here I was teaching Boko Haram conflict refugees in the Durumi refugee camp 2 years ago. And when I got that call from a refugee that they were being evicted from the land, I knew what that would mean. I knew that meant that the children that I had taught would now become currency to their families to survive. Without paperwork, without skills, without a secure home and access to health care, so many of the things that we take for granted, children are for sale. And so I stepped in to create this solution. A village that would give everybody all of the skills and services that they needed to become healthy, to heal, and to regain their independence. So I wanted to show you a video of how I chose courage to save lives over 5,000 miles away from Richmond.
I can't save you, but I'm going to teach you how to save yourself. Today.
Me.
How many syllables is peacemaker? How many syllables? Aha, very good.
I'm a peacemaker.
I'm a peacemaker. Very good.
It's a wonderful therapy. I've not seen it in any camp. And I wish and I pray and I beg that this can be replicated. And this can only be replicated if somebody or some people or some group have the funds to help people like Yewande with such a beautiful heart like hers. She left her comfort zone and came here to be with us in our mess.
And why did you leave?
Boko Haram.
Said Boko Haram chased them from their homes.
Families have identified the girls as some of the more than 200 students kidnapped from Chibok, if you remember, 2 years ago.
Okay, so can we look inside? So how many people live in here?
There are 8.
that equate to acres.
This is a business run by all of these women, IDPs that escaped Boko Haram, but have not given up. 2 months ago, I started teaching them social entrepreneurship online, and this is the result of that concept. Teaching these women how to take the skills and talents that they do have and create a business that could impact change in their communities.
You have to know why your product is better than anybody else's product. What's another reason? Quick, another reason. Cost effective? What else?
Please assist Yewande to assist stuff as well, because she can't do it alone, you know. She can't do it alone.
I've personally funded this work with refugees and trafficking victims for almost 3 years. But now I need your help to build this transformational rehabilitation model. This is a humanitarian crisis that affects all of us. Did you know that more than 200,000 victims are trafficked from Nigeria to America and Europe? Your donation will help me protect, educate, and shelter refugee children, raise awareness about global human trafficking in my documentary, Amazing Grace Freedom Song, and give these families a chance to change the world.
I wish someone could hear me, but they only turn away.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much. What I hope that you've learned today is not only that you're far more courageous than you give yourself credit, but that acts of courage change the world. They make our homes better, our communities better. They make us invariably better. But the greatest act of courage that you could perform is to do what makes you happy, to do the right thing, even when it's scary. Because when you choose courage, it gives other people permission to also be courageous. So I hope that you'll choose courage as often as you can. Before you leave today, I want you to just quietly and personally make this statement for yourself before you leave this space. Today, I will be more courageous about what? How you choose to answer that question, to complete that statement, is up to you. But one thing I can guarantee is that the world is waiting for you to act courageously. Thank you so much.